They walked onto my property without permission. No warning. No knock. Just crossed the line like it was theirs to cross. And that's when I decided to show them what it means to cross me. I still remember that feeling. The rush of anger mixed with disbelief. How dare they? My home, my space, my rules. But there they were, the HOA board members, striding right across my yard like they owned the place, ignoring the signs, ignoring my calls to stop. It wasn't just trespassing. It was a message, a warning, and it hit me deep. I tried to keep calm at first, tried to reason with them, but they weren't interested in talking. They just wanted to push their power, to remind me who they thought was in charge. It was frustrating, humiliating, and honestly, a little scary. But I'm not the kind of person to back down. Not when it comes to my home, not when it comes to respect. So I made a choice. I decided to turn the tables, to show them that if they wanted a fight, they'd get more than they bargained for. I dusted off a little knowledge I had, something I call ranger tactics, and I planned my move. What happened next? Well, you won't believe how I handled it. How I led those board members in circles for hours, frustrated, and lost on my own land. It wasn't just about winning, it was about sending a clear message. So, let me take you through exactly how it all went down. Trust me, this is a story you don't want to miss. I live in a quiet neighborhood, the kind where everyone knows your name, or at least they think they do. The streets are lined with neat houses, trimmed lawns, and sidewalks where kids play after school. It's peaceful, mostly. Our little community is run by a homeowners association, or HOA. At first, I thought it was a good idea. Rules to keep the neighborhood looking nice, making sure everyone follows the same standards. It sounded fair. And honestly, some of the rules helped keep property values steady. But over time, things started to feel different. The HOA board was made up of a handful of neighbors who took their role way too seriously. They weren't just enforcing rules, they were acting like they owned the place. Before the incident, my relationship with the HOA was tense, but manageable. I had received a few notices about landscaping or paint colors. Nothing major, just little things they said didn't match the community. The aesthetic. I pushed back when I thought they were overstepping. I asked questions. Sometimes they listened, but often it felt like I was talking to a wall. My property is pretty straightforward. A small backyard fenced off from the neighbors, a side path with a gate, and a clear boundary marked by old weathered posts. I took pride in keeping it well maintained, but in my own style. That's where the trouble began. The HOA claimed parts of my side yard belonged to a common area they managed. They said I wasn't allowed to plant trees or put up anything permanent there. But the property lines on the official map and my deed showed otherwise. I tried to explain this, showed them documents, even hired a surveyor once. The HOA just ignored it, or dismissed the information. There had been a few heated emails, warnings about unauthorized modifications, threats of fines. But I thought we could work it out calmly, until the day they crossed the line. Their trespass wasn't just about property boundaries. It felt personal, like they wanted to prove a point, to remind me who was boss. It was invasive and unjust, like someone barging into your house without knocking, rifling through your things, and telling you to be quiet. At first, I felt powerless. What could I do against a group with official authority, armed with rules and bylaws? I was just one person, but that feeling didn't last long. Because when someone takes your home for granted, you find a way to fight back. And that's exactly what I planned to do. It started like any other morning. I was outside tending to my garden, enjoying the quiet hum of the neighborhood waking up. Then, out of nowhere I saw them. 3 members of the HOA board, walking straight onto my property. No knock, no warning, just stepping right through the side gate I had closed the night before. They didn't look friendly. Their faces were hard, set with purpose. They weren't here to chat, or to ask politely. It was clear they wanted to intimidate. My heart sank. I felt a mix of shock and anger. How could they just walk onto my land like it was theirs? I called out, "Hey, can I help you?" But they ignored me, moving deeper into the yard, pointing at things they said were violations. Their voices were sharp, clipped, like they wanted to get it over with fast. I stepped closer, trying to stay calm. "You can't just come on my property without telling me," I said. "This is private land." One of them smirked. "We're here doing our job. This is part of the community area. You're the one breaking the rules." That hit me like a punch. They didn't care about facts or documents or surveys. To them, my land was their playground. I felt fear creeping in. What if this got worse? What if they decided to fine me, take legal action, or worse, destroy things I'd worked hard on? I took a deep breath and tried reasoning again. "Look, I have papers proving the boundary lines. Let's talk about this." They just laughed. "No time for that. We're here to inspect and enforce. You should be grateful we care enough to do our job." Their rudeness was a slap in the face. It was more than just trespassing. It was a complete invasion of my privacy, a violation of trust. They were trampling over years of peace I had built in my home. I looked around: my garden, my fence, the side path. This was my sanctuary, and now these strangers were turning it into a battlefield. That's when something inside me shifted. The initial shock and fear faded, replaced by a burning resolve. I wasn't going to let them bully me. Not on my land. Not in my home. I said firmly, "You're on my property without permission. I'm asking you to leave." One of them stepped forward, voice raised. "We don't have to leave. We're here until this is resolved." That was the final straw. In that moment, I decided I wasn't just going to stand there and argue. I was going to make them understand. Not with words, but with action. With strategy. With a plan they never saw coming. And so, I prepared to turn the tables on them. Because some lines aren't meant to be crossed. And when they are, you have to stand your ground, no matter what it takes. After they refused to leave, I felt a wave of frustration wash over me. It was one thing to be disrespected. It was another to be powerless. But sitting there and doing nothing? That wasn't an option. Not for me. I started thinking. I've lived here for years. I know every corner of my property. The hidden paths, the thick patches of bushes, the tricky spots where the ground dips or rises. I knew I had an advantage. That's when the idea came to me. Use what I know to take control, to make them uncomfortable, confused even, to turn their aggression into frustration. I call it ranger tactics. Ranger tactics aren't about fighting head-on. They're about using patience, smarts, and skill to outmaneuver someone who thinks they have the upper hand. It's about moving quietly, knowing your environment, and guiding your opponent exactly where you want them, without them realizing it. I imagined leading those HOA members through my property like a maze. Let them chase me, get lost in the tangled paths, waste their energy trying to catch up. It would be a game of patience, not power. No yelling, no shouting, no confrontation, just calm control. A small smile crept onto my face. For the first time that day, I felt hope. Hope that justice wasn't out of reach. I mapped it out in my head. I'd start by walking slowly, deliberately, using the narrow side path. Then, double back through the bushes, cross over to the backyard, and circle around the fence line. I'd let them follow, but never let them get close. They'd tire themselves out. They'd lose their confidence. And maybe, just maybe, they'd think twice before stepping onto my property again. It wouldn't be easy. It would take patience and nerves of steel. But I was ready. This wasn't just about winning a small battle. It was about sending a message. And the game was about to begin. I took a deep breath and started walking, slow and steady, down the narrow side path that runs alongside my fence. I could hear them behind me, the sharp footsteps, the voices getting louder, more annoyed. The first board member was close, trying to catch up, but I kept my pace just out of reach. The path twisted and turned through thick bushes, making it hard for them to follow easily. I knew every inch of it, where it narrowed, where it opened into a small clearing, where the ground dipped unexpectedly. I used these spots like a secret weapon. At one point, I ducked behind a large oak tree and paused, letting the others catch up. When they appeared, flushed and sweating, I moved again, veering sharply left into the backyard. Their frustration was growing. I could hear them arguing. Which way did he go? Are you sure this is the right path? I didn't answer. I just kept moving, calm and collected. We reached the back fence line, where a row of tall hedges created a natural barrier. I slipped through a narrow gap I'd created weeks ago, and doubled back along a small trail they didn't know about. Their footsteps faltered. One of them called out, "Wait, stop messing around. Come back here." But I stayed silent. No words, just movement. Every time they tried to cut me off, I twisted and turned the other way, like a fox leading hounds through the forest. The heat was rising, and I felt the adrenaline kicking in, but I stayed focused. At one point, I almost tripped on a hidden root. For a second, panic hit me. Were they close enough to grab me? But I caught myself, steadied my footing, and pushed forward. The HOA members were growing desperate. I could hear their voices get louder, their footsteps heavier and slower. Their confidence was slipping. "Are you sure this is your property?" one sneered, trying to intimidate. But the doubt was clear in their voice. I led them through a small patch of wild flowers I'd planted years ago, stepping carefully so they'd have to follow in single file. The narrow path forced them to slow down even more. Their complaints turned to grumbles. Then came the turning point. I paused at the edge of the garden, feigning hesitation, looking back as if I was unsure which way to go next. The board members crowded around, whispering and arguing, trying to figure out my next move. Suddenly, I slipped through a small side gate I had hidden behind thick vines, a gate they didn't know existed, and vanished into the front yard. For a moment there was stunned silence behind me, then frantic footsteps. They were running now, trying to keep up, but the confusion was clear. I circled back around the house, moving swiftly but carefully, and found myself back near the side path. The board members were scattered, tired, and visibly frustrated. One of them yelled, "This is ridiculous. You're just wasting our time." But I was calm, quiet, in control. The sun was starting to dip lower in the sky, and their energy was fading. Their faces showed it. They were lost, exhausted and angry. I could feel the satisfaction building inside me, mixed with a rush of adrenaline. I had turned the tables, made them chase a ghost on my land. And just when I thought they might finally give up, I heard a new sound behind me. Footsteps, slow, careful. Someone else was coming. Who? Why now? The tension spiked again. I glanced back, heart pounding. But this time, it wasn't who I expected. Just when I thought the HOA members might throw in the towel, or worse, try to force their way through, I heard footsteps approaching from the street. Slow, deliberate footsteps, but with purpose. I turned and saw Mrs. Ramirez, an elderly neighbor who lived 2 houses down. She was known in the neighborhood as someone who always stood up for what was right. She wasn't part of the HOA board. In fact, she often clashed with them quietly behind the scenes. But seeing her walking toward us now, I felt a sudden surge of hope. "Is everything okay here?" she asked, her voice calm but firm. The board members stopped in their tracks, clearly caught off guard. They exchanged uneasy glances, as if realizing their little power play was now under scrutiny. One of them tried to put on a confident front. "We're just doing an inspection," he said, though the edge of uncertainty was noticeable. Mrs. Ramirez shook her head. "On someone else's property, without permission. That's not right." I stepped forward, feeling a cautious optimism grow inside me. Here was someone who could back me up, who could stand between me and this aggressive group. The board members shifted uncomfortably. The tone had changed. Their usual confidence wavered. Mrs. Ramirez looked at me, and then back at them. I suggest you leave before things get more complicated. Her presence was like a shield. It wasn't a full victory yet, but it was enough to pause the conflict. I breathed a little easier, relief mixed with determination. I wasn't alone in this fight. The HOA board members muttered complaints, but slowly began retreating, glancing nervously at Mrs. Ramirez as they did. That moment changed everything. It wasn't just about me anymore. It was about standing up to unfairness together. And just like that, the power dynamic shifted. What happened next? Well, it set the stage for the final chapter of this battle, and the message I was determined to send. With Mrs. Ramirez's steady presence, the HOA board members slowly backed away from my property. Their confident sneers faded into reluctant grumbles, as they realized they weren't going to get their way that day. They muttered about following up, and formal complaints, but it was clear the immediate battle was over, and this time, it ended on my terms. They left, heads down, defeated but stubborn. I knew this wasn't the end of their fight. They could still try to challenge me through paperwork, emails or official meetings, but the way things went down, I felt empowered. I had stood my ground, I had protected what was mine, and I had done it without losing my cool or resorting to anger. The feeling of justice, simple but profound, settled over me. This was about more than property lines. It was about respect, about boundaries, both physical and personal. Sometimes, people forget that a home isn't just a piece of land. It's where you feel safe, where you decide what's yours. After that day, I became even more vigilant. I put up clearer signs, talked to neighbors, and made sure everyone knew the property lines were official and respected. But more than that, I knew I had found a new strength in myself. The strength to stand up quietly, but firmly when it matters most. The ordeal reminded me that respect isn't given, it's earned and defended. And while the HOA might try again, I'm ready. Because now, I know exactly how to protect what's mine. This story is about more than one fight. It's about finding your voice when others try to silence you. And sometimes, the smartest moves come from patience, knowledge, and a little bit of strategy. This story shows that calm intelligence and strategy can beat aggression every time. When faced with force and disrespect, rushing in with anger might feel natural, but it's patience, knowledge, and quiet confidence that truly win the day. Knowing your rights is powerful. Understanding your space, your boundaries, and standing firm without losing control sends a clear message. You will not be pushed around. You don't have to shout or fight loudly to protect what's yours. Sometimes, the best defense is knowing when to move, how to outsmart, and when to wait. That quiet strength builds respect, not just from others, but from yourself. If you ever find yourself feeling powerless or threatened, remember this story. You have the power to stand your ground peacefully and effectively. At the end of the day, it's about self-respect, justice, and protecting your peace. Thank you for listening to this story. If you found it inspiring, please like, comment, subscribe, and share this video. Your support means everything and helps bring more stories like this to light.